Hey, I'm Jon Thelen, host of Destination Fish TV. I want to talk panfish today. I want to talk about the lures I'm using, why I use them, and when I use them to catch panfish of all shapes and sizes. I'm talking crappies, bluegills, perch. Man, I think that when it comes down to it, pan fishing is one of my favorite ice fishing deals. I don't always have to be chasing walleyes, but I'll tell you what, there is a rhyme and reason to how I choose the lures I choose, and on any given day, some of these lures are going to be more effective than others, and then it's going to flip-flop the next day. So I'm going to explain to you why I choose the ones I choose each day, and how you should start when you get out on the ice and go through that progression to figure out what's what on any given day. Number one, let's talk crappies. I think crappies are probably the most popular panfish species that people are chasing in the wintertime. And I'll tell you why. They taste great, they're willing to hit, and they're easy to find because 9 times out of 10, once they get slid out of those weeds, they're a schooling fish and we're going to be able to find them. But there's a couple things. I think number one, when it comes down to it, making crappies bite can be really, really tough on any given day, even when we find them with those electronics. So there's a variety of lures I drop down to try to make these fish bite. And I'm going to show you exactly what the progression is that I use. Number one, I think aggressive fish. I'm going to try to get the aggressive ones out of that school first. So here's what I do. I drop down bigger baits than most people might at the beginning of my chase, at the beginning of the day, once I get on them, and I drop down more aggressive lures than most people might. And what that's going to do is usually get me the most aggressive fish out of the school, and a lot of times it'll get that school wound up. And if I can get that school of fish wound up, holy smokes, now I believe I can just sit and catch them. So here's where I start a lot of the times. This is a 16th ounce Rattlin Flyer spoon. Man, this thing's pretty tough to beat. It does a little bit of everything. You can stack this thing up with wax worms, maybe it's Euro larva or a minnow head. But you can bang this thing around down there. It's going to flutter out to the sides. It's going to fly out to the sides. It's going to put rattles down there, a bunch of glow colors. It's going to get their attention and then flash on the back. Incidentally, a bunch of new colors that you're going to find this year, all glow colors on the Rattlin Flyer spoons. Man, I'll tell you what, they're just deadly when it comes to crappies. If for some reason they're not willing to hit something that aggressive, here's where I go next. I go to a glow spoon. And this Lindy glow spoon, here's the thing about this one. It's not going to fly out to the sides quite as much. It's got a swimming action, but not like the Rattlin Flyer spoon. It's not going to be as aggressive. It's going to be a little bit slower drop. And then on top of that, we're going to be able to light it up. We're going to illuminate that whole lure with the light stick in the back. By doing this, we're going to rely a little bit more on their eyesight. And if we can get these fish to see it, a lot of times that'll be the trigger to make them come up. You'd be amazed how often I'm dropping a glow spoon down, and because this thing is so bright, on its way down, those crappies are already on their way up. So this is where I go next. I go to a 16th ounce Lindy glow spoon. Then from there, if things just don't seem like these fish want to be aggressive, it's time for me to slow it down. So here's what I do at that point. I'll go to the new Ratlin Quiver spoon. This was brand new last year. Great lure because it's got rattles in the eyeball. So as this lure is falling, that rattle's just going tick, tick, tick in the eyeball all the way back down. Super glow colors and a plated back. So what you're going to get there is that flash along with the color. But here's the thing. This is a lightweight spoon. It's made from a lightweight material and it's got that curve in it, which makes it so that this one's not going to be as vertical up and down and it's not as fast up and down. This one is going to have much more of a roll to it and it's a slower drop, giving those fish more time to look at it. And on those days when they're not super aggressive, more time to think about whether or not they should come up. And a lot of times that slower drop will make a difference. Then the next stop would be the standard quiver spoon. And here's why I go to this standard quiver spoon if I'm not getting them to hit that Ratlin quiver spoon. The bottom line is the rattle is the only thing there that's different. There are days, and days in clear water, where I find that a regular quiver spoon without the rattle can be just as or more effective as a spoon with a rattle. So keep that in mind. There's a difference there. One of them's making noise, one of them's not, and on any given day that can matter. That's why I've got both of them, and I'm going to work my way through that progression. Again, a 16th ounce, great colors, plated backs. Man, I'll tell you what, just deadly. From there, I'm going to really get myself to that point where I'm going to slow way down. And what I mean is I'm barely moving my jig. And a great jig to do that with is the Frosty Jigging Spoon. This is a 16th ounce. Don't overlook using an 1/8 ounce as well. Both of these sizes are great with crappies. You can fish them whole minnow under a float, or you can fish them Euro larvae, you can fish them spikes, you can fish them waxworms, you can fish them with a minnow head. But it's a slower presentation. Here's where I'm barely moving it, and I'm giving those fish a chance to come up and look at it. No noise, and a very subtle up and down action is what you're going to get out of this lure. It's not going to fly out to the sides. It's not going to flutter and do all kinds of stuff. It's very subtle up and down. There are days where I'm going to tell you this is the deadliest lure that you could put down there for a crappie. Lastly, I'm going to really slow it down, and I'm going to go to a tungsten toad. This is when I'm going to go to a couple waxworms on here, couple Euro larvae, spikes, whatever it may be, but I'm going to really slow it down. This is just a number 10 tungsten toad that's going to get down to those fish quick, and I'm just going to quiver this thing right in front of them. I'm barely going to move my wrist, barely engage in that rod, and just dance this thing in front of them. Really cool thing about the tungsten toad is we're going to talk about bluegills in a second, but whether you're fishing crappies or perch, this one comes in a size 10 hook, and that size 10 hook fits well with those fish with either a bony mouth or a bigger mouth. So that's the progression I'm going to go through when it comes to crappies. Now let's talk bluegills. A couple things I'll tell you about bluegills. When it comes down to it, I do believe I can catch a lot of the biggest bluegills that I'm going to catch on something like this, a 16th ounce Rattlin Flyer spoon. I know it seems like an awful lot, but I'm going to tell you some of the biggest bluegills in my life. In fact, one on the wall right over here came on a Rattlin Flyer spoon. So don't overlook big baits again for the biggest of the fish. Now, a lot of times you'll get that bluegill, he'll have all three of those treble hooks in his mouth. He'll eat that whole thing, but I'm going to tell you it can be really, really deadly. From there, your frosty jigging spoon is another great option when it comes to gills. They just love this sitting right in front of them. And remember this about bluegills. They're a fish that is a lot more curious and a lot carefuler about what they're going to bite, or so it seems. When a crappie gets on the move, it seems like they're going to bite it most of the time. But bluegills will come up, they'll look, they'll think about it, and they'll kind of give you that back and forth attitude. Well, here's what I'll tell you. There are days where dropping down something that's barely moving can make a big difference, get you a few extra fish at the end of the day. Then we'll go back to the tungsten toad. And this is a real simple deal. Now this one I'm holding right here, this size 14 hook. You go to a smaller hook size now and just put a Euro larva or two on there. And again, just dance it in front of them. If there's one mistake I see people making with tungsten jigs, it's they're jigging it too much and they spook panfish off. If you watch me when I'm working a jig, I'm barely moving it. I'm just dancing my wrist around and I'm just dancing that lure down there. That can make a big difference. It'll get you a few extra bites. Lastly, let's talk perch. Anything we've got on the table here right now is going to catch perch. Rattlin Flyer spoons, quiver spoons, Ratlin Quiver spoons, the glow spoon, these frosty jigging spoons. But one more I want to show you because it is a really cool lure is this perch talker. These perch talkers are really neat because they've got brass beads and discs. They make noise, and if you watch perch on a camera, they're a very curious fish. They'll come in, they'll look at noise. But when the testing was going on this lure, and I was one of the guys who got to test this lure, we started with the treble hook hanging right down off the lure. Well, the problem was the bait was too close to the noise, or the noise was too close to the bait. Call it what you like, the perch were a little bit intimidated by it. We caught a lot of walleyes. Hence, that's where we ended up developing the wally talker. But what we did is we put this dropper chain on here and it changed everything. When you can put the noise up here that attracts those perch and then put the bait down here, man, I'll tell you what, it can be just deadly. The other thing is you can just barely move this and look at how that hook dances around down there. Well, that's what's happening right in front of those perch's face, and that's what gets them to bite. All said and done, no matter what, panfish is your favorite. Perch, crappies, bluegills, you name it. Lindy's got a lure that's going to catch fish day in and day out. Work your way through that progression, go through all these different lures, and I guarantee you, you're going to find something that works most every single day on the ice.